We're kicking off another fantastic episode of Singletrack with a very official intro message by co-host Matthias Eichler, who has nothing better to say than to say his own name. Douglas is on the line on the other side of
Have we ever introduced ourselves on this?
I don't know if we ever have, but we should not start it now.
No.
This is a special episode, though, and for that I'm super excited because we have Abram Dickerson on the third phone, second line, other ear on Skype. Abram Dickerson is from Washington State, and he will tell us all about Aspire adventure running and probably a whole lot more. So, without further ado, welcome Abram to the show.
Hey, thanks guys for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. It's great to talk to you. You are putting out some really cool things into the world right now. I am just going to read your bio off of your website right now, aspireadventurerunning.com, and you can tell me if anything has changed here.
Sure.
So Abram has been planning and executing wilderness adventures for over 2 decades. Running, climbing, and skiing are expressions of his desire to live a life defined by passion and challenge. He has over 10 years of guiding experience, a love of good food, and a deep respect for the mountains. As a husband, a father, educator, and urban homesteader, he lives his life with intention and simplicity. He loves trails and the friendships that result from the suffering and satisfaction of running them.
So Abram, if you ever want a audiobook recorded, Doug's NPR voice is great for that.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing it makes me like, man, I want to meet that guy.
He sounds awesome. And then you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, that's me. So the one way I want to start this right now is a love of good food. Let's talk about food right off the bat here. What is good food to you? Like, what do you love to eat? What do you love to make?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, so I grew up in a household with, I'm the oldest of 5 kids. And so I think to survive kind of a hectic household, my mom just had these kind of go-to meals, like spaghetti, out of the can, or, she had this like hamburger with milk gravy on rice. And it's like, I feel like growing up, we had like the same meals, just like in perpetuity. And so, in high school, I had some friends who came from different households that had a couple of kids, and like, man, there was all this great food in the world that I sort of was introduced to. And I know that just kind of, so really from a young age, like back in high school, like I started just experimenting with cooking and recipes, and over the years that's certainly evolved. But I guess to say the thing that I love the most is just really kind of seasonally inspired food. So, kind of really being attuned to that rhythm of the seasons, fresh salad greens in the spring, tomatoes in the garden in the summer, and then in the fall, the winter squashes and kales. And, so just kind of being in touch with that rhythm really kind of inspires my palate. Being here in the Pacific Northwest, lots of great fish, dishes and salmon, when the salmon runs are happening. So, I mean, I enjoy being out on runs and finding chanterelles and mushrooms, and, I'm not like a hardcore forager, but like just pulling from that kind of our local ecosystem and incorporating that into what I eat and cook is a lot of fun.
I love it. That's great.
You say urban homesteader. Where is your home base?
So I'm in Bellingham, Washington, so kind of North Puget Sound. I'm not sure where all your listeners are tuning in from, but yeah, it's northern Washington. We're pretty close to the Canadian border. We've got the Puget Sound, the Pacific Ocean, sort of just about a mile from where I'm at. There's a little trail that heads down to the beach, and then behind us are the North Cascades. So we're kind of right in the heart of Cascadia, which is pretty special.
That is a fantastic place. My wife is from up there, spent plenty of time up there. Also, I have to call you out on this tomato in the summer thing. Like here in the Pacific Northwest, our tomatoes ripen in like early October if we're lucky.
Well,
Unless you know how to do it and do like greenhouse start or something like that.
yeah, I definitely start my seeds indoors early, and then
Nice.
I've built this. It's kind of a DIY greenhouse. I've got a south-facing garage, and I've built kind of a greenhouse sort of zone. Kind of my hot stuff goes in there that's south-facing, and so I guess it's late summer before the tomatoes are really.
I've got friends of mine that just moved up here from Texas, and they just complained to us how confusing the farmers markets were over the summertime, because they went to the farmers market and tried to find local produce, and the seasons felt off to them because they're from Texas, and their farmers markets probably have, I don't know, barbecue or something on it. I don't know what Texas farmers markets offer.
Just ribs.
Just ribs.
Farmers market. That'd be great.
That would be great. That's the kind of farmers market I can subscribe to.
And so you said you're the oldest of 5, correct? And how did your childhood and upbringing kind of lead you into running and the outdoors? It sounds like it was hectic, and was it used as an escape, or did you get into running later?
Yeah. I came to running through kind of other outdoor recreation sports like climbing, alpine climbing, skiing, backpacking. So I really kind of came to running later. Really probably it's been about 10 years ago that I kind of really found running. The outdoors happened quite a bit earlier. So where we grew up in Northern California, growing up, our family was in this little town in Northern California called Nevada City, Grass Valley areas in the foothills of the Sierras, and about 20 minutes from our house down the highway was the Yuba River, sort of the South Fork of the Yuba River, which is there's 3 forks that come out of the Donner Pass area of the Sierras, and so the South Fork was the one closest to home. And I just really fell in love with this river and picked up a guidebook in high school called Yuba Trails, and just spent pretty much every weekend for multiple summers just like exploring every trail, connection, swimming hole in that whole kind of river drainage. That's I kind of really kind of attribute that as sort of like the birthplace of my real kind of just connection to the outdoors, to wild and scenic spaces. And that sort of just, started this whole, I don't know, I guess it's just kind of been an unrelenting kind of pursuit for exploring kind of different zones. So coming out of high school, so that was sort of the epicenter, or the sort of the beginning of it all, I would say, would be the Yuba River in California.
What brought you up to Bellingham then?
My wife and I did grad school at the University of British Columbia, and then I started, my career really was teaching and education. So I was working at a small independent and experiential high school here in Bellingham. And so we found that just kind of as I was wrapping up my master's in education at UBC, which was just across the border. And so that's what got us to Bellingham.
Nice. So most memorable experience out on the trail, so your personal adventure experience.
Of all time?
Of all time. Yes, yeah, we're still...
Yeah, you're going with the hard question.
I'm going with the hard question, absolutely. I thought we're going from barbecue at Texas farmers markets immediately to the most memorable outdoor experiences.
My most memorable outdoor experience ever?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Is it a hard question?
Matthias, what's your most memorable experience outdoors?
We're covering a lot of ground.
Let's go around the room on this one. You start.
I've got plenty to choose from. I mean, nobody's gonna check on you, right?
Yeah.
there are no
There's no
wrong
fact checkers?
There are no fact checkers, right?
Okay.
There,
Fact check.
I'm still fascinated with the idea that you did a lot more than just running. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if your most memorable outdoor experience might actually be mountaineering or climbing or something else.
Yeah, I think probably probably the most memorable kind of experiences I've had were probably my alpine climbing days, which, feels like, it feels like it's been a while. This was like out of college. I was really good friends with a climber who was up in Idaho. And he really kind of took me under my wing and sort of really kind of like was my mentor into the climbing world, Dean Lords, who's based out of Idaho Falls, Idaho. And he had a real passion. He was a much stronger climber than I was, much more proficient climber than I was. But I think he knew I was at least a willing belayer and would say yes to a lot of crazy things. And I worked hard. So, I guess that qualified me as a climbing partner. But yeah, so his real sort of interest was in obscure, technical mixed rock and ice climbs throughout sort of central Idaho and the Pioneer Range and the Lost River Range, which is really kind of an obscure part of the kind of recreation world. But there's some beautiful, remote, backcountry climbs that are in there. And at the time we were doing some pretty technical mixed rock and ice climbs, and there were a couple different routes that we set as first ascent sort of in the Lost River and Pioneer Range. So it was kind of a season, kind of a couple summers. These routes would come in the springtime during the freeze-thaw cycles. So I know there was probably maybe 3 or 4 climbs that we did that were first ascents in that zone, and that sort of that era of my life is probably where I was pushing the edges at the most, probably kind of just in peak all around climbing fitness. Had really great partners, and we're just doing stuff that really were pushing the limits a little bit. So that era is pretty special to me.
Nice.
So.
You see how that fit in, Douglas? You made fun of my question.
I know. That's what we do. No, it's especially that central Idaho region. I went to school out in Moscow and got to explore. I had some friends up in Salmon, and we'd go up just into the middle of nowhere, and it was so great. And it's such an underrated area, but it's a very wild place. It doesn't have any of that like structure that you kind of expect. Forest Service roads aren't well marked, everything like that. So is that kind of what your current jam is, of just having like a little bit more of that controlled extreme environment where it's not necessarily the run of the mill?
Yeah, I think, kind of the evolution for me was, that was an era of, pre-kids and lots of freedom and, and so having a family, like so running, so I've always been active, but it becomes, you never really, for me, it was never a matter of like, quitting or giving up on those dreams, but so how do I integrate this passion for the outdoors and find the balance, with the family and a career and all these things that we all juggle, right? So, some people can, the Fred Beckys of the world can be dirtbags their whole life, and that's awesome, and I chose to have kids and a family, so. But I don't want to give up on those passions and that sense of adventure. So how do I find that balance that works? So I think that's kind of really where kind of running, I think, comes into the story for me, is like running became this opportunity where, I can leave my door and spend 2 or 3 hours on local trails. I don't need partners. It's great if I've got partners and friends. It's super accessible. And I can get out on these great little adventures just, every day, 3 days a week or, whatever it is that my training schedule's on. And then that consistency then frees me up and opens up this huge potential of routes and experiences in the mountains, when that season comes, like, all right, I've got the fitness, I've got the baseline, and I can take a half a day or a day, and I've just done 20, 30, 40 miles in the mountains, where like, and I can still come home and that hasn't taken my whole weekend, I can still be available for my family, and so it fits well into my life. So
no, that's fantastic, and I love when
that was kind of the idea, right? And then things got like, it's gotten a little bit more complicated than that, but but that was the idea. It's like, wow, running is this great way that I can just move fast in the mountains and balance my life. So
that's basically the both of our trail running careers emerged from that. Of you start getting these places you want to go to, you start getting these goals, and we don't have time to backpack, so how can we do this quickly and efficiently, and what can we do to get there? Was there a place that you had as a goal, was kind of that first big destination?
Like,
I want to do this.
Yeah, the first goal was it was really a friend of mine says, hey, let's go run the Copper Ridge Loop in the North Cascades, which is a 34-mile loop that, I don't know, it's probably got 8,000 or 9,000 feet of climbing on it, and that was sort of the, like, okay, that was my first real running objective, like, where, I mean, I'd gone for runs for training, and that was part of a larger, fitness routine or whatever, but that was my first running goal. It was great. I mean, it kicked my butt. I remember some of those training runs being like, there's no way it could be harder than this, and it turns out it was. But I don't know. I mean, like, that, having it being hard was part of what was great about it. It didn't come easy. I appreciate a physical challenge. And so it was hard. It was gorgeous. There was a group of us that did it as friends, and, it was, in a lot of ways, it was kind of like the origins of what Aspire has become, where it was like this kind of, it was this route. We got together with friends. We parked at the trailhead the night before. We had a fire, we cooked up food. And it was just, half a dozen of us just kind of sitting around the fire who had come together to do this route. And a lot of us had been training together for it, and some other new people that, we just were meeting, and, we bivvied at the trailhead, and the next day we woke up and spent all day out on the trail, and then came back and had, just like more food and celebration that this route had happened. And I was like, man, this is great. This is fantastic. So.
Doug, don't you love it when our guests kind of find the perfect transition into the next section?
I love it.
It's brilliant. So you mentioned Aspire, and let's transition a little bit, and let's talk about your business. So we are rewinding to this time. You're passionate for the outdoors. You love spending time outdoors. At what point, what was the impetus where you're like, you know what, I think I want to add a business to this. I don't want to be the person that kind of cuts his life in half. Here's a good job, and then I'm going to go running. I want to bring the business into the outdoors and make the outdoors part of my business.
Yeah. I mean, at the time I was teaching school, and so it was kind of a classic educator incubator model, right? So we're like, oh, I've got my summers off, and we started really small. That particular run in the North Cascades sort of, it was one of those things like, well, man, now I've got this fitness, so like I don't want to just stop. Like, now what else is available to me? And really quickly, just looking at maps and routes, and it's like it was really clear the things that were motivating me required key swaps and, logistics and shuttles and just kind of pieces to kind of make it all work. And at the end of it, it was like, man, like I just want, calories now, food, feed me. And a lot of these routes are, they're nowhere close to restaurants or amenities. So that was sort of just where my attention and energy and interest and motivation gravitated to. And having summers off as an educator, I was like, I think there might be a thing here, right? Mm-hmm. There might be an opportunity to do some of this, logistical guiding support work specifically for trail runners and do that in the summertime. That can kind of pad out my teacher salary. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't even really matter. I mean, even if we don't make any money, then, maybe we'll get some cool gear and we'll go for runs in the mountains, right?
Yeah.
It was a pretty low bar in terms of what the objectives were, what we're trying to do with it as a business initially. And then I guess just over the years, that investment in energy into the business, and it's definitely, we could talk a lot about actually all the turns and pieces, but like that was, I guess that was the initial like threshold for success, was pretty low.
Yeah. How many years did you run it as a side business while teaching before taking the jump full time?
It was about 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it was about 4 years. So we just finished our sixth season, and it's been about 2 years that like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
And so when you were getting started with this as a business, how were you trying to connect with runners? How was what was the marketing strategy? How were you trying to get this word out? Because obviously it's a lot of word of mouth and things like that, right? So what was if there was one, what was the strategy there?
Oh man, it's so funny you asked that, because like I totally remember, as I was like, doing this, thinking that, oh man, the marketing is going to be the easiest part of this whole thing. Which, I just kind of laugh at that now. It's like, oh, I guess that wasn't the easiest part.
Well, especially 6 years ago, there were no podcasts to jump on, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're new, nobody knows. You just, well, I mean, it's kind of funny. So in terms of strategy, like I really thought that like, okay, I saw all these races. There's plenty of trail runners out there. People are flocking to these races. They sign up in droves, right? You see Western States selling out, or you see Orcas 100 selling out, or you see these great races that are in beautiful locations and they're selling out with hundreds of people. And my thought was like, well, I only need like 12 people. Like we're operating in the wilderness area, so we're going to have smaller groups. Yeah, our price point's going to be higher, but I just need such a small percentage of these people to say yes. And so starting out, like, so that was my thinking. And I thought like, oh, if I just say we're running in the North Cascades or running around Mount Rainier, then pretty quickly people are going to choose the more scenic, more remote option. That was the thinking. And, I think that's still true, but I'm just much more aware of, this, like, I'm not just competing with, other companies doing something like me or other events. It's like I'm competing with the entire universe that exists, that's clamoring for attention on the internet, which is like, that's a little bit different.
For sure. So when you had this idea,
go ahead.
No, yeah, but so you had this idea of like, I wanna. The idea was bring the essence of the idea together for me.
Yeah, I mean, the essence of the idea is that the most beautiful trails that exist, like in North America, are all in wilderness spaces and national parks. You're never going to have a competitive race or event in these spaces. Like, they're never going to allow large competitive events in these spaces. A lot of these locations are, they're remote, they're logistically complicated to get to. So there's a value that comes from the logistical support in terms of having, transportation there, having food there, having the routes laid out and identified, having some support on the trail in case of an emergency, and then finishing each day with like delicious food and camaraderie. It's just like we can do that in these places. So that's sort of the heart of the idea. It's like that's a service that we can provide.
Yeah. So did you, when you, this is like a deep dive business question now. So you had this like vision. And you knew the limitations of the Wilderness Act and what you can do and how you can operate with it. Did you put pencil on paper and figuring out the logistics of how this can be feasible as a business? Or was it really, I mean, you alluded to a little bit that if you just need to break even at first or get some gear out of it, then that's good enough. But at one point, did you figure out, okay, this needs to, because you're working with such tight limitations, because you're working with these federal agencies, and they have very strict guidelines, not just in what is allowed, but also what you as a company to provide in terms of insurance, right? So you have very fixed ceilings and financial boundaries. And how did you carve a business out of that? And I don't know if that's even a question that makes sense, but I feel like that's fascinating for somebody who runs a business to figure out, how because you're not just competing against other people doing it, you're working on such a unique playing field.
Yeah. The margins, we're going to be a small, the margins of what we do aren't huge, right? So, it's, for me, so there's slim margins, right? We're not creating software that like, once we've built it, then we just like scale it up and give it to, 5 million people. It's a different model. So, I definitely have done that. I definitely have, and over the years, like I've been able to track expenses and establish what our margins are. I was confident enough in those margins that like, okay, I think I can make the jump and scale this thing and match my teacher salary and grow it. So, and we've been able to do that. So the margins are small. There's definitely a lot of QuickBooks bookkeeping that goes into that. But at the time, at the onset, like I was comparing what we're doing to other guiding and outfitting models, right? So the American Alpine Institute does this for climbing. There's backcountry ski guides, there's fishing guides, there's a model here that works in all these other industries that, but I didn't see anyone really activating the trail running community specifically with that same service. So I was confident that, okay, there's no real secret here that I don't think guides and guide businesses like, make a ton of money. They have a great life and if they play their cards right and everything works out, you can feed your family and have a small staff and it's a good life, so that's, I think that was the kind of the parallel that I was looking at. It's like, okay, I know this is possible because I see it happening in these other industries. So.
Yeah.
Go
for it.
Oh, go ahead, Mathias.
How is it working with federal agencies to get permits? Tell us a little bit about this. This feels like a daunting task, and it could be that no listener is interested in that, but I'm sure Doug and I are fascinated by this because we've looked at various ways of engaging with various agencies, and it's interesting. It's interesting, right?
Yeah. I mean, the reality of permitting is, fundamentally, it really boils down to the Wilderness Act. And the Wilderness Act defines, what parameters and usages that wilderness is. And there's definitely provisions in the Wilderness Act for commercial services, to be able to help people and the public, gain access to these lands and spaces. And I think fundamentally the federal agencies that are managing wilderness areas, recognize the need for guiding and outfitting to help the public access the space. Mm-hmm. And that's the basic premise. That's kind of a high level philosophical premise, in terms of the day-to-day management, different parks, the Olympic National Park. I've been trying to get a permit there for 6 years, and mm-hmm. they keep giving me, well, we're waiting for this analysis. We're waiting for this. We're waiting for that. Or, the North Cast, like Mount Rainier was the first park to give us a permit. And, and they looked at our proposal and said, okay, you're basically hiking faster. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah, that's basically what we're doing. And so our permits with them fall under a commercial use authorization for day use hiking. And that's a similar model that we have with Yosemite and with the North Cascades. So it's, ultimately it falls to each park, each national forest district office in terms of how they're looking at their particular landscape and demand and usage and trails. And they're looking at the Wilderness Act, and then they're making their own decisions about how much guiding and outfitting they'll permit. So, So it's kind of a long way of answering your question. It would be like, it really depends on the agency, how open and they are to working with us in our model. But,
yeah, and you touched on something that I was going to ask of, how have the agencies responded to trail running, right? Because there's this kind of perception of trail runners, and it's not exactly a popular thing to do on a lot of federal lands, especially national parks. It's not like this thing that they advertise a lot of. So I was curious if you've had, any negatives with the community around the park or the park itself of them maybe not understanding what trail running really is. Because like you said, it's basically fast hiking, right?
Yeah, so. Yeah. I mean, it really is fast hiking. I think I've kind of seen it all. Like, I know some of the people I work with that I permit, are trail runners themselves, and they totally get it, Mm-hmm. And then other people are like you say running, and like the image that they get in their mind is a race and, someone sprinting, so.
Yes.
So it's really a spectrum. And I don't know, the way that I kind of position it is really wanting to educate the parks and build relationships with all the people we work with around, hey, this user group is here to stay. Like this is a growing area of use and interest. And we want to position ourselves in relationship to wilderness and parks and runners around stewardship, advocacy, partnership, and education in terms of what responsible use looks like on those trails. And so, while it's interesting, right? Because runners, I think runners come from lots of different directions. The traditional hiking, climbing communities, they have more of a history of use in wilderness areas where, a runner, maybe they ran track and cross country in high school and college, and then they did a bunch, and they had their years as road runners, and then they got into trails, and they may not have that same background in terms of stewardship, leave no trace, how do I safely navigate and move in backcountry spaces. So I think we position ourselves between the running community and the land managers as a bridge for education, support, to be able to use those spaces in a respectful, conscientious way. So
I love that. That's definitely a great way to brand the trail running community as respectful stewards of the land. I think there's this, we've talked about it before, but there's this kind of mentality that maybe we're like mountain bikers, right? Where we want and it's not quite the same. And so I appreciate hearing that, like, that's kind of that angle that you're going with, because, you know, the people that I meet way out in the backcountry who are trail runners are the ones who are, you know, blue bagging their waist out, or at least, you know, bringing a trowel to do, you know, cat holes or something like that, right? There's all of these things that the trail running community is doing that isn't highlighted too well. So knowing that there's a company out there that's actually being like, no, this is what we do, this is what we teach, here's what we do, is a fantastic way to kind of change the dialogue and show that we're here to stay and we're good stewards. So I love it.
Yeah. That's really important to us. You know, I mean, we're doing that this year. We're doing we're partnering with backcountry medical guides. We're really excited to have like a wilderness first aid sport specific class for runners. So,
Nice.
so runners are getting, you know, wilderness medicine training. That's kind of one of the growth areas I'm kind of excited about. What we're doing is like really developing skills classes in addition to just destination trips, so that, you know, runners can see us as like, you know, if you're coming from a race background or not a trail background, and you're interested in this, you know, there are skills that you can learn and develop, whether that's, you know, navigation and map reading or fast packing, or we're gonna have a few snow travel, self-arrest, glacial travel courses that are going to happen this spring that we're really excited about. So bringing skills for backcountry travel to the running community is something we're really excited about.
You see, again, with the perfect transition, I can't believe it. My next question would have been, looking at 2021, what are you most excited about? I mean, especially in the light that it does not look good for races. There will be races, possibly, potentially, who knows? But it definitely will be another disrupted year. You just announced a full calendar of events, and because of your small group sizes, you're able to operate. So for our listeners, if you're thinking of planning for 2021, you really need to check out Aspire's calendar of events for the year, and perhaps rather than signing up for imaginary hopeful races, perhaps put one of those Aspire events on your calendar. Talk to me a little bit about what you're most excited about. I know you open up a couple new ones, and what is some of the favorites that people, the ones that sell out fastest, that people love and sign up them based on your experience?
Yeah. I mean, how long do we have?
Yeah. As long as you want to. I don't want to keep you longer, but if you want to take a deep dive, go for it.
So, it's you know,
we'll bring you back. Let's put it that way. We'll bring you back. You don't have to put all the eggs in today's basket. We can have you back on at a later show, and we can take another deep dive. So.
Yeah. You know, fundamentally, I'm just really appreciative that we can confidently publish a calendar that, I mean, nothing is totally certain, right? But I'm very confident, we're going to be able to fulfill all of our trips. You know, I've had long conversations with all of our permitting agencies, and, you know, we operated in 2020, which is incredible. We've got a full list of COVID protocols that, you know, we're following and we used. And, you know, I think we're a safe bet for people. You know, there's no guarantees in the wilderness ever, but in terms of mitigating risk and, you know, being confident that people can plan for our trips, yes, that's something we're excited about. And that is because we do the small groups in outdoor spaces.
Yeah.
In terms of what I'm most excited about, we had to cancel all of our trips to California in 2020. I'm really excited to get back down to California. We've got a 4-day trip through Yosemite National Park that's, it's, you know, you basically can run 100 miles over 4 days. So you're looking at 20 to 25-mile days. There's some variations in there if people aren't quite up for a full 100-mile distance, but I'm excited to get back down to the Sierras. We had just ran our first Yosemite trip in 2019, and it was incredible. So I'm really excited to get back into the high Sierras and do that. We've got a new stage trip in the Goat Rocks Wilderness that is incredible. It's going to be fantastic. It's a 2-day, 50-mile route. So it's like a 20-mile day and then then day 2 is a 30-mile day. That terrain is unreal. Mm-hmm. It's so much ridgeline running, so much above tree line. And it's really special because you're just really right in between Mount Adams and Mount Rainier, and you can see Mount St. Helens. So you're right in this Cascadia, volcano zone. It's really special. So that's
nice.
Really excited about that.
Such an underrated area too. I was looking at that one. I just did some writing about Goat Rocks for a publication, and I was like, oh man, I need to go back there with this appreciation of trail runner eyes. It just looks beautiful. That is. I'm excited to see you guys have that because it's not the easiest to maneuver around on your own. So have something like this is so cool.
Yeah. We've got a really good 2 days point to point. It's gonna be really special. It's kind of funny. I've got friends. I've heard from a lot of friends who've like backpacked the PCT, and it's not uncommon for PCT through hikers to be like, oh yeah, Goat Rocks is like my favorite section of the whole thing.
It's absolutely crazy when you look at the route and you're like, all right.
Cool. Yeah. So when you've got, people that have done the whole PCT and multiple people saying, oh yeah, Goat Rocks is like one of my favorite sections, like there's something there for sure. Yep. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And, I'm excited about our skills classes. I'm really excited about, I think what's really cool, I'm excited about my staff. I've got super great people that are helping me out with Aspire, who are coming back. All the people that worked with me this year are all coming back next year. So I'm feeling really good about the team of people who are really helping me kind of bring the vision to life. Like I feel really good about that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot to be excited about for next year. So,
to slowly wrap this up and wind this down, you also part of co-conspirator at the Trail Film Festival, and in 2020 we saw all kinds of virtual events, and you're doing one more. Tell us about the December event.
Yeah, so the Trail Running Film Festival is historically we take the best trail films of the year on a national tour, around the country. That's not happening this year. We did a summer series of virtual shows, and we're doing the fall/year-end edition. We've got about an hour and a half to 2 hours of films that we're gonna share, and I think they're all like new films. 3 of them at least are like 4 are world premieres, things that have never been shown before out on the trail running community. Nice. There's some stuff we're really excited about. There's probably the one that I think is the most notable in terms of like just wow, I want to kind of see that story. There's a lot, but the one that kind of resonates, I think. Michael Ortiz just finished his game of hundreds. So if you don't know about this, Michael Ortiz ran 100 milers over 100 consecutive weekends.
Oh, that's insane. I don't want to know about this. I do, but I don't, because that just makes me very, very sad about myself.
I have so many questions about this too.
I know. It's like, what? Yeah. What? Yeah, it's almost, yeah.
How did your legs not fail you?
Like, no, the question that I have is, you don't have family, do you? Because I don't think I could even remotely invest that amount of time.
Yeah. James is friends with Michael, and so as we kind of got wind of this project and knew what he was doing, like we knew it was like, okay, we've got to get this documented, like this, because Michael's not a sponsored professional athlete, right? Mm-hmm. He's not someone that has all these sponsors backing him and documenting this, that we kind of see in other large goals of, kind of a similar project vein. And, he was really inspired by his brother, and who passed. And he kind of did this life evaluation. It's like, man, I need to, what am I doing with my life, and what is possible? Mm-hmm. And so knowing a little bit of his story, we got in touch with some filmmakers and who've been able to capture several of Michael's races, and were there in New York City when he finished his 100th here just a few weeks ago. So it's going to be really exciting to see that narrative all come together on the screen. So that'll be the game of Hundo. So that'll be our kind of culminating film, but we've got other great stuff too. So that's happening on December 5th.
December 5th, and people can get tickets at trailfilmfest.com. Is that the domain? Did I get this right?
That's right.
Trailfilmfest. Perfect. So we'll have links in the show note. Abram, anything else you want to plug?
Well, I just appreciate you guys kind of having me on. It's been fun. So
absolutely. So
of course,
for all our listeners, we'll have links to Aspire in the show notes. Check out Abram's calendar for 2021. There's some awesome events there. I have like a million more questions, especially about the wilderness medicine and all of these additional ideas. So we'll have you back at some point if you can spare an hour. I'll go on your calendar and reschedule you again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we could talk about specific trips. We could talk about those skills classes.
Absolutely.
There's so much there. I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's bringing so many people out on these cool adventures where you may not be able to do it on your own. And as somebody who looks at all these routes and says, well, maybe someday, knowing that there's this opportunity there is extremely enticing. And so I hope everybody checks it out, because I can guarantee that if you go on your website, if anybody listening goes on there, you're going to find a route that you're going to say, like, I need to run that. So you're doing a great job.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I think we really do try to have, it's easy to talk about the Wonderland or the Yosemite or some of these bigger trips, but, we really are pretty intentional about trying to create trips that are accessible to runners of all abilities. And so if you're someone who's like, wow, I don't think I could do, 95 miles in 3 days, like, well, great. Come check out some of our other trips, that are 60 miles in 3 days, or something like our North Cascades ridgelines, like Nooksack ridgelines, where you can do like 10 or 15 miles a day, or take an off day. But it's, there's some accessibility for runners of all flavors.
Love it.
Fantastic. Abram Dickerson from Aspire Adventure Running. Thank you so much for joining us on Singletrack. Douglas, any final magical thoughts?
Wear a mask.
wear a mask. This is how we end this. People, wear a mask.